accelerating past them and cutting in, taking their space. Patiently, John Boy slowed each time to create the gap again. The process repeated itself, but John Boy remained unperturbed, attention on the road. At home he was a driving instructor, and the new year would see him back in the passenger seat, being similarly patient with young learners crashing the gears of his Austin Maestro. Germany had produced no surprises. They'd driven around the Rheindahlen army base unhindered in the car they stole in Essen. Another of John Boy's skills. Brian was handy to have on board as well. With a German mother, he was bilingual. They let him do the talking. He had nerve too. Even though this was his first foray in earnest, he'd been calm. Francis hadn't needed to nurse him through as much as he'd anticipated. They'd drawn up plans of the base, which they had then carefully transcribed onto graph paper with different headings. The officers' mess became the engineering building, the parade square, the muster area, and so on. It all squared with the legend they'd built for themselves, backed up by a chartered surveyor's office in Dublin. It was so close to Christmas that to check their story would be impossible anyway. The office would be closed today, Christmas Eve, but it was good practice. Brian's linguistic skills and his boyish charm had found them a small house in the Taunus that could be rented informally as and when they needed it. No forms to fill in, cash in hand. Quite an achievement, Brian said, because in Germany people tended to bow to bureaucracy. He found the place in the small ads of a local Frankfurt paper. The owner had inherited it on the death of his father and was concerned about tax. They agreed that Brian would give him a call in the new year when their plans for birdwatching had advanced. The distance from the main area of British bases was good. It allowed them to lay off and relax, while the Autobahn system enabled them to be on target swiftly. They dumped the German Opel in Nijmegen and immediately found a large, anonymous Ford that would suit their purposes. Now they approached the port. It was 4:40 and still pitch black. Perfect, thought Francis. The eager beavers wanting to get home early. They approached the holding area before embarkation, and John Boy reversed effortlessly into a space on the distant side of the car park near the entrance. Cars had begun to gather, not too many. As the car stilled and the engine ticked away its warmth, Francis felt the tension rise inside. Which of them could fail to sense it? They looked intently in different directions, as if searching for meaning rather than for threat and safety in the gloom of their small corner of France. Francis wound down his window and looked across the wet tarmac. Floodlights illuminated the main drag near the booths that would soon open for the 6:30 ferry. In the distance, trucks accelerated onto the ship. Closer by, he heard English voices. People from 3 cars had congregated and a hot flask was being shared. The children were excited, tracing small circles and figures of 8 around the cars and the adults. "Careful of the traffic," shouted one of the dads, but there was little danger. There was perhaps 9 cars in this vast space, including the one in which Francis, John Boy and Brian sat. A small Nissan drove in and parked separately from the other vehicles. Like them, it was right-hand drive and it bore the distinctive pattern of registration plate for which they were looking. 3 letters, 2 numbers, then B. British Forces, Germany. The driver emerged and stretched his arms. His wife got out of the other side, tipped her seat forward and with some difficulty lifted a baby from the rear, swaddled against the cold in a bright blue padded polyester suit. Maybe a year old, thought Francis. The man helped a little girl out from his side. She was fractious. "Daddy, I'm hungry," she said plaintively. She might be 4 years old. Brian exhaled loudly in the back. Francis turned to him. "You okay?" he said. "Yeah," replied Brian quietly, eyes alight, body tense. Francis looked at John Boy and nodded. John Boy started the engine and it murmured quietly. Simultaneously, Francis and Brian climbed out of the car and pushed their doors to with quiet clicks. They looked ahead.